All right, so I got a couple of people I want to bring out, smarter people than me, who I wanted here to join the table. Mary Elliott is a world-renowned historian and curator of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. And Dr. Khalil Muhammad is a professor of history, race, and public policy at Harvard. Thank you both for coming. Whatever questions that you guys have had, these are two of the most prolific thinkers in this arena in our country, and well, probably the world, on this subject for sure. So yeah, we've been answering questions from young people who have seen the movie. So who do we have here?
My name is Maria. I'm from Philadelphia. My question is, how do you think this film will help us understand where we are now as a country when it comes to race?
You know, I always say when I do tours or speak about the content that we feature in the Slavery and Freedom exhibition at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Which everybody has to go to
Yes.
if you've not been already.
I was there for the opening.
Yes, he was. But I always say it's important to know who we were, who we are, and then think about who we want to be and how we can get to that who we want to be, right? We should not learn history just for the sake of learning it. I don't need to just memorize dates, names, events, places. It's important to understand about inhumanity and humanity, right? I also look at people who say, how could this happen, when they go through the exhibitions and they're so distraught? And I'm like, but the good thing is, you are feeling distraught about that.
Absolutely.
That's your humanity saying that this is wrong, right?
Yep.
And I believe that having conversations like this, while this is Red Table Talk, this is a family table that we're sitting at right now. I don't know about you all, but I always went to family reunions every 2 years. And my ancestors, now ancestors, my grandfather, would sit in the middle of the circle and recount our family history.
Wow.
And so it was important, and that's what led me to doing the work that I'm doing now. Now, how does this help in terms of talking about race? Because, for example, if you come into the museum, there are Black people, white people, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, able, disabled, all looking at the same content, and they're all talking about it.
Absolutely.
Most often you hear, how come I didn't know this?
Yep.
And so it's very important, this film,
Yep.
it's making the history accessible and also telling the nuances. And so it's prompting very important dialogue for us to talk about how do we get to where we are, and race being at the heart of a lot of this, and why we're still dealing with it, why we haven't addressed a lot of these issues today.
There's a moment in the film when Ben Foster's character, he's the main slave catcher, is telling the story about his childhood. And when I saw that scene, the lesson there from the father to the son is that this is about power. It's not about how you feel. It's not about the relationship you have to this person. If we concede our hierarchy, if we let this person have a seat at our table where we are in charge, then we will have conceded our power.
Absolutely.
And the story of race, while it's important to acknowledge the way that hatred works, the way that bigotry and prejudice works, the story of race is really the story of power. We control these people's lives, and if we ever let them forget it, they will come for us.
Absolutely.
When Thomas Jefferson began to write a declaration, he actually writes into an early draft the problem of slavery as the problem of the British Crown enslaving the colonists.
Absolutely.
And that is removed from an early draft precisely because other founders, particularly Southern Virginians, thought we don't want to draw attention to the contradictions that we are actually enslaving people while we are claiming political liberty from the British Crown. So you can't actually understand the founding of the nation without the founding fathers themselves being very cognizant of their own sense of being oppressed by England and by their own recognition of the oppression of others. They essentially wanted freedom to be able to oppress others.
Wow. Wow.
This is
They wanted the freedom
insane.
to do. Yes.
Well, you know, the thing that's interesting about that is a lot of this, we talk about the laws and legislation and how it impacted, you know, the lives of black people, but everyone, right?
Yep.
So I always tell everyone, in my museum, we talk about history, American history told through the lens of African Americans, through an
Yes,
African American lens.
absolutely,
But what I
absolutely.
also say is this lens looked out onto a world that had enslaved black people, free black people, indigenous people in bondage and free, poor white people,
Yes.
yeoman white farmers,
Yep.
and planter elite. And so all of those characters are part of this American history, and all of them are impacted by what was going on. So that idea about power, that legislation that I mentioned before, where freedom is restricted for many different people in different ways, that plays out as well. Even when we think about like black men being able to vote up until the 1830s in Pennsylvania, if they were free and owned land, but a white man who was poor and could not. The law changed in 1838.
Wow, I did not know that.
Right.
That's
nuts.
That's nuts.
So people say, you know, it was forever ago. It was over 100 years ago. It's like
Yeah.
right. So you're talking to students every day. How would you illustrate the impact of slavery from 1865? How is that impacting today?
For starters, you have an insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th. It is the first time that the Confederate flag is in the Capitol in American history. So we think about all that this country has been through, and certainly in the context of the Civil War, how do you explain that to people but for the fact that the symbol of the Confederacy has remained a constant source of inspiration to a significant portion of our country.
Absolutely.
Also, there's a gallows placed on the Mall for Mike Pence, the then vice president. Whether it was symbolic or real, we don't know. I mean, if you're a black person, you don't live in this space.
At a minimum, you don't stay around long enough to find out.
Exactly. That's right. So if I'm teaching my students, you've got two of the most powerful symbols of slavery and white supremacy in the United States, really symbols in the world, right there in front of us, playing out on national television. And the consequences of that aren't just about the kind of excesses of this moment. The consequences of that are actually about the health of our democracy in this moment.
Yes.
That's really powerful.
So for something like the connection of slavery to healthcare, do you draw a line between the institution of slavery and today's modern healthcare?
Absolutely. The truth is, you could draw a line to most everything in our contemporary moment. And healthcare is an interesting one because it is literally a matter of life and death in terms of what the legacy of slavery means for people, particularly black people, who show up to deliver birth. So literally, the story of gynecology, founded by a man named J. Marion Sims, who was a South Carolinian born of the planter class, who becomes a surgeon and practices in Alabama. The story is that he was a genius in his desire to solve a number of problems in terms of childbirth, but he practiced on enslaved women.
Yeah.
Up to 30 of them.
Deeply tragic.
He treated these women as if they could not experience pain. He treated them literally as the raw material of scientific innovation, because the understanding, not just for J. Marion Sims, but the understanding for lots of scientists of the mid-19th century was that black people essentially didn't experience pain. And he's the one who ultimately helps to advance the science of anesthesia, which is another.
But he didn't use it on those women.
But he didn't use it on those women. So what we know today to be common instruments for gynecologists when delivering health care to women grow out of the experimentation that he did on those enslaved women. And so it's not an accident that the fact that black women die of maternal childbirth-related diseases 3 times more often than white women. It's not an accident that black people who present in clinical settings across the country, including during COVID, this is not ancient history, still have to convince physicians and medical professionals that they are experiencing the pain that they are actually experiencing. Wow. And from everything from diabetes to cardiovascular health, the assumption is either that it's not as bad as the black person says it is, or that they brought the condition on themselves and are less deserving of healthcare and treatment. So healthcare is one thing, but the entire scientific enterprise essentially used indigenous and black bodies as raw material for scientific experiments. My own university, Harvard University, to this day, still has the bodies of formerly enslaved people from the 18th century and 19th century and thousands of native remains, because those bodies were collected to do science.
And then you also have trying to show that black people were inferior, and you have Louis Agassiz.
Oh, sure, yeah, another Harvard.
Travels down to South Carolina and takes photographs of these black men and women stripped nude, but really trying to show that they are of lesser intellect and physical ability. And so those photographs are still at Harvard today. People can actually see the actual images and know that this actually happened. Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. In your teachings, do you see a correlation between slavery and today's industrial prison complex?
Well, you hit a sweet spot for me. I write a lot about the criminal justice system. And I mean, first of all, the story that you tell is set in Louisiana. Louisiana is home to the largest maximum security prison in the nation. The prison opened over 100 years ago. It was the conglomeration of 5 sugar plantations that were consolidated to become a prison. And if you were to visit Angola prison to this very day, you would find that 75% of the population who are African American are doing the work that the formerly enslaved once did during slavery. So those folks today are still being monitored by prison guards, aka overseas, on horseback.
On horseback.
On horseback.
Wow.
They are still cultivating the same crops, cotton, sugar. Sugar is cultivated on this plantation, and it is sold in the prison gift shop as cane syrup today.
Wow.
So when you talk about the legacy of slavery, first of all, the criminalization of African Americans overnight becomes the primary instrument for moving black bodies back to plantations. So while it is true that the physical space of Angola, former slave plantations, is still the largest maximum security prison, and black people are still there and doing the same work, it's not the same people. But that doesn't mean that this idea of criminalizing black people's freedom has ended.
If we think about Juneteenth, right? June 19th, 1865, and General Gordon Granger and the Union Army goes into Texas and announces General Order Number 3. I'm paraphrasing, essentially says you are now free.
I go back to work.
You have all the rights, right? Literally. And the relationship between enslaver and enslaved is now the relationship between employer and hired laborer. Oh, and by the way, you are expected to live in your present homes, your slave cabin.
Wow.
Oh, and by the way, we won't settle for idleness. So that means you are now working under sharecropping system. You will be back in that same slave cabin, and don't expect to be lazy or idle.
Wow.
And that was from a Union Army general.
Just quick Reconstruction lesson. The South and the North compromise over the election of Rutherford B. Hayes in 1877, which ultimately means the federal troops pull out. Southern redemption means taking back control of the South, and also means taking full control over black people. And with that, the criminal justice system now exists for the formerly enslaved are now subject to all sorts of criminal sanctions that really have nothing to do with criminality and everything to do with the expressions of freedom. Meaning that they're trying to vote, they're trying to negotiate land, they're trying to leave jobs. To literally leave a job because you were either being cheated, or because it was a bad deal, or because you were ready to move on, the minute you stepped away from that plantation where you were working as a sharecropper or a tenant farmer, or even as a kind of cash day laborer on a sugarcane plantation, you were considered a criminal and a vagrant. Could not only be picked up by the local sheriff, but then you could be sold at sheriff's auction back to the same plantation that you just walked away from. That continued, and in some ways it metastasized because it moved from the south to the north to the west. It took the form of policing of black mobility during the period of migration. My great-grandparents migrated from Mississippi and from Georgia and moved to Chicago. And policing took on the form of keeping black people in their place. And so when they fought for political rights on the streets of Philadelphia or Chicago or New York or LA or Detroit or Cleveland in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, when they came back from World War II and they said, you know, we have fought against the Germans and the Japanese to end fascism in the world. We are not going to be second-class citizens in our own home. It was police officers who were on the front lines of putting them back in their place. And then, of course, all of that, you know, got us the civil rights movement, but the backlash to the civil rights movement brought us the war on crime and the war on drugs. And that's when we built the biggest prison system the world has ever known.
The snowball effect is
Yes.
insane when you look at it.
Yeah.
People need to see it like that.
100%.
Those were seeds that have grown into weeds that you got to know where the root is to be able to get it out.
I do think it's important that we make sure that everyone is part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
That everyone knows that this isn't just a story limited to black people. I cannot stress that enough, because otherwise we're just going to be talking to each other.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's not going to move the needle, the dial. We have to see who were all the people that were part of this making of the nation, and slavery's at the heart of it. Right?
The other day, someone was saying, you know, it's Black history. And there was something about the tone that I didn't like, and I suggested that we stop calling it Black history, because I feel like Black history gives other people permission to not learn it. It's American history.
That's real.
It's world history.
It's world history.
Right.
So we often hear, if America were so bad, why are so many people trying to come here? And of course, it's all relative, right? So the promise of America is not the guarantee of a beautiful life, of a life of freedom and economic security. The promise is that the 1 in a million chance that you can go from rags to riches is more likely here than in many other parts of the world.
Absolutely.
But the difference is that in other parts of the world, you may not go from rags to riches, but you may actually have universal health care.
Right.
So you may live with subsistence farming, which means you'll have nutrition, you'll live closer to the land, but you won't be all blinged out and all of this. So, but the point in saying that is that as the richest country in the world, you can't get to those riches but for the contributions of black people. So, in other words, what makes America so attractive to the world can only be understood in the context of the unfree labor that helped to build that wealth.
Absolutely.
And that, as you say, is not a black history story. That is the story of the United States and the story of a liberal democracy that has shaped the fortunes of many other countries and peoples around the world.
Absolutely. Dr. Muhammad, Mary Elliott,
Yes.
this has been absolutely spectacular. Thank you very much. The story of Peter has opened my heart and my mind. I understand this country. I understand the difficulties that we're experiencing in a way that I certainly didn't a year ago. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for continuing to fight the good fight.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah!